Welcome to the Recovered Republican, where we unlearn the falsehoods we were raised on and dig into the real issues shaping Indiana and the country. Today, I have a special episode for you. I'm joined by Brandon Newhart, an attorney, advocate, and yes, my husband, as we break down what happened to the Democratic lawmakers who were recently spared by the grand jury and why every single one of us should be paying attention. This story isn't just political drama, it's a warning sign, a civic lesson, and a moment that deserves more scrutiny than it's getting. Brandon, thank you for joining me, and let's get into it.
Thank you for having me today.
Well, thank you for joining me. I know it was a long drive for you.
Well, I'm glad to be featured on this podcast finally and learn more about what's going on and see how things are going. Thank you for having me today.
Now, this is actually something you pointed out to me, and you sent me this video. So, just explain to us what the video is we're talking about.
We're talking about the famous "Don't Give Up the Ship" video in which Democratic lawmakers who are also veterans talk about issues in which public servants and service members can either refuse or must refuse orders that are illegal. And that's the kind of the context here. Illegal orders being ones that are either unlawful by state law or federal law, or ones that are against international law in some regard.
We actually have the video and we're going to play it for everybody so everyone knows what we're talking about.
I'm Senator Alyssa Slotkin.
Senator Mark Kelly.
Representative Chris Deluzio.
Congresswoman Maggie Goodlander.
Representative Chrissy Houlihan.
Congressman Jason Crow. I was a captain in the United States Navy.
Former CIA officer.
Former Navy.
Former paratrooper and Army Ranger.
Former intelligence officer.
Former Air Force.
We want to speak directly to members of the military
And the intelligence community.
Who take risks each day
To keep Americans safe.
We know you are under enormous stress and pressure right now.
Americans trust their military.
But that trust is at risk.
This administration is pitting our uniformed military,
And intelligence community professionals.
against American citizens.
like us. You all swore an oath.
To protect and defend this Constitution.
Right now, the threats to our Constitution aren't just coming from abroad.
But from right here at home.
Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders.
You can refuse illegal orders.
You must refuse illegal orders.
No one has to carry out orders that violate the law.
Or our Constitution.
We know this is hard.
And that it's a difficult time to be a public servant.
But whether you're serving in the CIA,
The Army,
Our Navy,
The Air Force.
Your vigilance is critical.
and know that we have your back.
because now, more than ever,
The American people need you.
We need you to stand up for our laws.
our Constitution,
And who we are as Americans. Don't give up.
don't give up.
don't give up.
Don't give up the ship.
So, from that video, it looks like they are reciting something. What is it they're reciting?
Well, the members of this video are Democratic lawmakers, and what they're trying to do is discuss their veterans also. So they've all been service members and served for the United States military previously to their service with Congress. And what they're trying to say is that the key message that's being said is either you can refuse illegal orders or you must refuse illegal orders. And this is directed towards current active service members and public servants, right? And the idea is these are lawful things, right? It's all within things like the Uniform Code of Military Justice or military regulations, which clearly state that when it comes to unlawful orders, you can refuse them. And that's what they're trying to say, that if you see something wrong that you can't follow, it's immoral or illegal or unlawful, you have a duty to not obey those orders or refuse those orders in that case. And there's much legal background for why that can be allowed.
Okay, so what I hear you saying is they were simply stating what our own military code of conduct says, and it actually is in line with the laws. Is that correct?
I'm going to speak to this at a high level. And the idea is that I was fortunate in my legal training in law school. One of my professors was an actual Top Gun in the Navy. And we actually went to do some JAG training schools and do some seminars with the Judge Advocate General's office in Virginia. And we learned that, the Uniform Code of Military Justice allows for situations where you may not be required to follow an order, or you may have reasons, whether it be federal law, whether it be local law, or whether it be international law that prevents you from following an order that's unlawful or unreasonable. And this goes back to, World War II times, the Nuremberg trial. People, Nazi Hitler regime and Nazis when they were being tried for war crimes saying, I was just following orders. And we've all accepted internationally that's not an excuse anymore for unlawful behavior or following unlawful orders. And there are opportunities for people with the Geneva Convention or federal law to disobey unlawful or illegal orders. That's what's being said in this video, to remind service members that they have a right and a duty in some cases to not follow unlawful orders.
Okay, so let me make sure I'm understanding this. What you're saying is not only is it in line with our own laws, our own military code of conduct, but it's also needed to be followed to be in compliance with the Geneva Convention?
In certain senses, yes. But let's break it down I want to make sure I'm not trying to get too deep into the weeds. But the idea is, like, let's talk about what an unlawful or illegal order could be, right? It could be targeting and intentionally harming civilians, right? It could be torturing, abusing detainees. That's under the Geneva Convention. That's the kind of thing we're looking at. It could be falsifying operation or illegal records. And it could be something like engaging in unauthorized political or domestic law enforcement actions, which we may be familiar with recently in history. But these are all examples of legal orders. And this is just a reminder to servicemen and women that if there are unlawful orders, that you may be able to refuse or follow those orders if you need be in certain instances. It's a reminder.
Okay. So then why, if this is legal, we are supposed to have the freedom of speech as well, why then did file charges against these 6 Congress people?
Well, there weren't actually charges filed, but the idea is that they're trying to get charges initiated and to use what they call a grand jury proceeding, right? But the idea here is the rule they were going under, or law they're going under, was a code where basically it says that it's a section of the U.S. Code that makes it a crime to interfere with, impair, or influence the loyalty, morale, or discipline of the military by counseling insubordination, disloyalty, mutiny, or refusal of duty. In this case, they're trying to make a tenuous act that these legislators and lawmakers were trying to, either cause disloyalty to the Trump administration or insubordination to their own military command or refusal of duty. But that's not quite what this is in this case.
Before we get into exactly what happened, I want to go over some terms because there are some important terms people need to know in order to understand what we're talking about. So first of all, what is a grand jury?
So when it comes to the federal prosecution, which is what's happening in this case, which is what's relevant and which was what got decided about recently, there's 2 ways these cases start. Either you can file a complaint, which is basically a written statement of the charges against an accused, what charge are being brought against someone, but that has to be made under oath. If you know, it has to be said under oath and written under oath that it's made that way. The second way, which is relevant in this case, is a grand jury. And what that is a proceeding involving 16 to 23 people. And their goal is to determine, after hearing testimony from the state's attorneys, the prosecutors, whether a case should basically go forward or not, or whether a person should be indicted. Essentially, they're called to determine whether or not there's probable cause, which is basically saying, is there enough evidence to show that this case should go forward and that a crime has been committed, essentially. Is there enough evidence to show that there could be a crime? Now, it's different from a jury at a trial because it's not determining whether someone's guilty or innocent. It's just determining whether there's probable cause to go forward with this case and indict someone. And here it was rejected. That's the key thing. So what's unique about a grand jury is that it's secret. It's sealed also, in that only prosecutors, witnesses, and court staff, like a judge and reporter, are there. The accused is not available. There's no defense attorneys there. And all documents related to it, all motions to even bring this apart, are sealed also, meaning kept private from the public unless later ordered by a court to be disclosed or by federal law requiring that. So that's what's unique about a grand jury here in this case too.
Okay, so if they say yes, that means they might be filing, then they'll probably file charges. But if they say no, then there's not enough evidence that a crime was committed.
Yeah, in this case. Now, they could possibly try to reopen this case later on, but they do know that public opinion kind of shades against it up front, at least. So it's kind of like a heat check in some degree. But right now, one of the representatives in Congress actually asked for the evidence used to be preserved so this can possibly be brought again. So it's kind of interesting. It's not just the attorneys that are doing it, the federal attorneys themselves, federal prosecutors, that other congressional members have thought, let's keep this evidence just in case in the future we want to try this again.
So you think they want to preserve the evidence to try another grand jury, or you think they want to preserve the evidence to come back to the fact to prove that perhaps certain individuals maybe are corrupt or committing other crimes?
I can't really speculate on that itself, but just the idea that you keep evidence shows that there may be a chance to try this. Maybe not a grand jury, maybe just filing the complaint, like I mentioned before, on its own without a grand jury. It's a possibility though, but it seems suspect because usually when a grand jury shows that they're not interested, it's a bad thing for any kind of prosecution, because the old story is that you can indict a ham, meaning that anyone can be indicted in a grand jury, essentially, because it's not really a full trial. It's just whether is there enough information, enough evidence to show that you have probable cause. And so if you can't win that, that's usually a bad sign. It's fatal to your prosecution usually.
Okay. So we don't hear a lot about grand juries in general. It seems really weird to me that, so an attorney general from the District of Columbia would do this to members of Congress, people who have been elected to a position, and that person should know that about these laws and know about these policies. So why did they do it in a grand jury, do you think?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I can't speak to what the U.S. Attorney does. It's not the Attorney General, just to understand it. It's the U.S. Attorney, Judge Jeanine, formerly Judge Jeanine, that was appointed by Trump, actually. She's the attorney of D.C. District that is running this show in this case. But the idea is, it's kind of an idea to see whether the public is going to be on their side or not, right? It's a kind of political move more than anything, it feels like, at this point, than actually seeking a prosecution for the betterment of the public or for the public safety, which what prosecutors do oftentimes, and enforce laws.
So is this the shady way of trying to start going after Trump's political opponents?
It does feel like that. And it's interesting because the law they're going after is a law that says it's unlawful to interfere with, impair, or influence, discipline of the military, or insubordinate or cause disloyalty or immunity. And I don't think that's what's happening in the video. I don't think it's happening. I think it's just a reminder that, if there's unlawful orders, you shouldn't follow them. And it's a heavy choice to make that choice too, because service members still have to prove they have the burden of proof to show that something's unlawful. So it doesn't mean that they can just do it willy-nilly. They know there's some risk to it all. But it's important that it's being reemphasized because there's problems here, possibly. There's problems being unlawful orders being given to service members or federal agents or public servants of some kind that should be disregarded or refused to be obeyed. And so this situation is a way to try to prosecute legislators and lawmakers who are opponents and they were all Democrats, if you notice, in a way to kind of backdoor going through the process of impeaching or removing people from office. It's a different way of doing it. Thankfully, the public said no, though, as we hear. So in essence here, the U.S. Attorney for District of Columbia, which is Judge Jeanine we just mentioned, she attempted to use a secret grand jury to see if there's sufficient evidence to support a finding of probable cause, and try to indict Democratic lawmakers for using their First Amendment right and to tell people to follow their laws and duties as service members and public servants. This move is not merely an effort just to prosecute someone or to enforce laws, but it represents a backdoor manner to attempt to bring contempt against these individuals without going through the appropriate channels to remove them. Despite the video being an accurate portrayal of public servant and service member duties to not follow unlawful orders, the Trump administration has made this message appear to be treasonous or seditious. However, once again, unlike each person in this video, Donald Trump never served his country in the armed forces and has virtually no idea what it means to have to be responsible for tough choices made by men and women during active combat. And so in this case, these legislators were just literally telling people to follow the law and to make sure that they were complying with orders that were lawful and not causing acts of international law violations or federal law violations that conflict orders are given under Trump's administration.
So by the Trump administration doing this, what is that saying to the American public?
I think it's clear that Trump is attacking his political opponents in any way he can. He's trying to find ways to use laws that aren't intended the way they were in this case. These sedition and loyalty laws aren't used the way they should be. It's not like these legislators were saying, stop following all orders that your commanders say, or commit acts of loyalty or disloyalty or treason against your lawful orders. That's not what they're saying. They're just saying, remember, you have a duty to follow orders that are lawful. You can't just say that I'm following orders and get away with things under international law or even federal law in some cases. You know, when a law order is not lawful, you're not required to follow in some ways under some different laws and different regulations under military code and military regulations also. It's just a reminder, essentially.
Why should this instance of this grand jury be setting off alarm bells and warning bells in this country?
Well, the problem is here, you know, they could have sought warrants. They could have sought arrest warrants. They could have filed a complaint. They could have filed summons to the lawmakers to let them know what's going on. But they chose to go a secret route. They chose to go the route of using the grand jury to see if they could get a heat check here, to find out if the public is on their side or not, whether there's actual public interest. And they found out no. The answer was overwhelmingly no in this case, because there's certain rules that you have to have 12 members at least agree to indict of the members I mentioned earlier, and they couldn't get that number. So that's the situation here. I think that's important to note that the public said no.
Is this an attack on the First Amendment or an attempt to attack the First Amendment?
That's interesting to say, because I think you could say yes or no. It's hard to see. I don't want to be a constitutional scholar here like everyone else is or claims to be online these days. But I think it's more of a situation where we're going after and we're trying to prosecute elected officials. There's a problem there with balance of power and things like that, right? I mean, it's one thing that the executive branch has that power to prosecute and things like that, but there's other ways to address congressmen. There's other ways for Congress to address their own members. And if Congress doesn't oversee those things and sees issues themselves, especially when they're Republican-controlled Congress houses, it's a situation where it's like, why are we doing this way? There's only one reason for it. It's political attacking. We should be concerned about that. We shouldn't be going for lawmakers this way. This is not the right way to handle a situation like this. They shouldn't have been in this position where they had to make a video in the first place, I think. That's so problematic that we have to worry about our service members following unlawful orders given by an administration right now that we're in. But the fact that we're attacking people in this way, in this manner, it just is absurd.
Let me see if I can kind of sum this up in layman's terms. So essentially what's happened is this Judge Jeanine that's appointed by Trump she had a grand jury called to see if these 6 Democrat Congress people, if there was enough evidence from that video to charge them with some sort of obstruction or encouraging people in the military to not follow lawful orders. And what that jury found was that there was not enough information or evidence. So it was a resounding no. You don't even have enough evidence for probable cause. Is that correct so far?
That's basically correct. The main thing we want to make sure is we take grand jury, right? Because this isn't a trial jury. We're not going to trial, but the grand jury overrulingly said no in this case, from what we know.
The secret,
because they're secret,
yes,
and like I said,
the secret grand jury that we won't know has said no, and that's kind of this temperature check by the Trump administration to see what they can get away with by trying to attack his political opponents through legal means.
I think it could easily be seen that way. And I think it also shows that there's not evidence they had otherwise. So they had evidence otherwise, they would bring these charges, they would bring a complaint, they could do it the formal way of using a complaint. There would be no, they say in the federal rules that basically this, public interest. They try to say that using grand juries, things of public interest, but in this case, the public didn't seem that way. They said no to this probable cause vote.
Yeah. And I do think it's concerning anytime there is a president or an administration actively trying to attack their political opponents. If there is somebody who has done an illegal thing, Sure, charge them. But why? There's no reason to go after people who are simply reminding military, active military people of their duty to make sure that they are not following unlawful orders. And they're not saying don't follow your commands that are lawful. So I think that's a big concern, because what if they're starting to go after people who are in political power? There's nothing stopping them from coming after the rest of us.
That could be a definite concern. I think that's why we are here today to discuss this, because it's such a unique position to do, using a special or a jury this way, a grand jury this way. And especially with service people who understand this law too. They're not just regular senators that never served in the armed services or anything saying these things. These are veterans. These are people who have served, and they bring that up front to let people know that I understand the law. I understand my duty because I serve my country and I follow the same laws and rules as you do today. And there probably aren't major adjustments to a lot of those laws, especially in the international sense, international law. There may be, uniquely things that have changed since Trump's been in power or since they've been in office. But for the most part, these people who are veterans, these lawmakers, understand what the rules are, and so that's why they can have some idea of what it means to follow these laws.
Okay.
The citizens said no here. They said no in this grand jury, and this should be important when it comes to November, these midterm elections, what that means. What is going on with Trump and his allies? What are they trying to do? What are they trying to do to affect democracy and the way we run America? That should be enough to show that maybe we say no when it comes to November to certain politics or parties and people who align themselves with the situation. Because this isn't the way things are typically handled, politics, when it comes to issues with congressmen. They have their own policing powers. There's also better ways to prosecute a case. You have to have evidence. You have to have something. There wasn't enough here, clearly. And that just says it's a political attack more than anything. And so we need to think about in the November midterms what that means for everyone.
Well, thank you for joining me today. Is there anything else you would like to tell our audience?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really glad I got to be on the show today with you. I often get to see the work that you do, but it feels great to be part of the participation, and the things you do are great, informing constituents and candidates about the things that are important to politics. I want to make sure everyone knows today that I'm a lawyer, but everything I'm providing is just general legal knowledge, and that none of the information today constitutes legal advice. So, like I said, don't take this as the end-all be-all. Feel free to have questions or reach out to your own attorney to learn more about these things, or even your own congressman to find out what happened on their end. So once again, thank you for having me today. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you for joining me. Yes, as a reminder, you can always call your congressman and leave them questions on their voicemail. Any questions you have, or email them. Call them like they are your best friend. Now, if you have not looked up your voter registration recently, please go do so today and make sure that your address is up to date. And just a reminder, Indiana did purge their voter rolls before the last election. So make sure you're checking your voter registration every few months to make sure it's still active and up to date. Thank you for joining us today, and have a great weekend. Bye-bye, everyone.